Hello and welcome to the War Story podcast. I'm your host, Garrett Jones. Great to have you joining us today, guys. If you are joining for the first time, a very warm welcome to you. Just a quick bit about what we do here at the podcast. We have a few different formats. We have Veteran State of Mind, where we talk to veterans about their experiences and successes after their service. And we have War Story, where we talk about people's operational experiences. And we have one of those episodes today with an absolutely brilliant guest. His name is Colonel Robert Wemheuer. He is a retired Marine Corps aviator, former base commander. He served multiple decades in the Marine Corps, predominantly around the CH-53 airframe. He served 3 tours in Vietnam. An incredible guest with an incredible story. So we'll get to him very shortly. Just before we do, I'd really ask you guys to, if you enjoyed today's episodes, if you take something from it, if you learn something, find value in it, please do share the podcast. It's the only way that we can grow. So there's all kinds of ways that you can share the podcast. You can tell a friend about it. You can use the various buttons that are on your apps, whichever app you're using to listen to. Text the link direct to a friend, share it on social media. And if you could leave a review, those really help as well. If you listen on Apple, or that's really easy to do on there. If you're listening on Spotify, if you could just give it a rating. All of that helps kind of drive the algorithm, which brings us more listeners. We believe that these stories deserve to be told and remembered, and I'm sure you feel the same way or you wouldn't be here. So with that being the case, please help us spread the word. All right, guys, without further ado, please give a very warm welcome to Colonel Robert Wemheuer. Colonel Wemheuer, welcome to the podcast, sir. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So I see you've got the globe and anchor on your chest there. I believe you're the 3rd Vietnam Marine that we've had on the podcast, but the first aviator. So I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today. I'd like to take things back right to the beginning, if you don't mind, and I'd love to know a bit more about where you grew up and if you had anyone in your family as a child who'd been in the services themselves.
I did, and I think maybe if I go back a little bit to the start, and that's my birth. I was born on October 16th, 1943. You might ask why that's important. Well, it's because my mother was a editor at the University of Chicago, working above the nuclear experiments that were taking place beneath her feet. And she had a hard time in the carrying of me during the process. And when I came out, I had multiple birth defects, 5 pounds, 5 ounces. I was a little kid, and I had a third, or actually a 6th finger on my left hand, and I had scoliosis of the back. My nose was flattened, and so I was a mess, you might say. Years later, they attributed a lot of these birth defects to the exposure to the radioactive materials that they were using underneath my mother at Navy Pier. But I grew up with a little bit of a stigma because I was a small child and got picked on pretty regularly. And so when I finally learned to read at the age of about 9, because I was had a eye problem. My father and suggested that I play football and do some wrestling in high school, and so that was a real opener for me because it put me in contact with a man who was my wrestling coach, a guy named Mudge, who was the instrumental in my development of going into the Marine Corps, and ultimately my uncle, who served in World War II, was also an inspiration, but I'll cover that story in a little while. Mr. Mudge taught me, first of all, he was a combat veteran of the Chosun Reservoir in Korea, and he taught me the first thing was what semper fidelis meant, was always faithful. He also taught me the principles of never quitting, never exhibiting fear, and always accomplishing the mission at any cost. He also, along with my family, helped me internalize the love of God, family, and country. Mr. Mudge not only did that, but he taught me what real equality is, not in the DIE or DIY sense that we talk about it today, but equality in his eyes were the fact that it didn't make any difference what color your skin was, what your eyes, if they slanted or not, and if you had anything different about you. It never mattered in combat or in life. He said, no matter who you are, we all still bleed red. And he exuded the terminology of always judge performance and character and not color of your skin or religious affiliations, etc. Those are the principles that he had, and I still have them today. You asked about my uncle. My uncle's my father's brother, and he was a bombardier navigator in World War II, and he was kind enough to show me when I visited his residence and when I was 7 that he had a bunch of medals, and I really didn't know what they were, but he pointed out a DFC, and I asked him, and he said, well, I'll tell you when you're old enough. So a number of years later, after several cocktails, he relayed the story of he was flying across France and into Germany when the Messerschmitt fighters attacked the formation of B-17s, and his was hit, and they killed both pilots, and he was able to make his way to the exit in the mid portion of the aircraft. He and the gunner from the back, and at the time they were about to leap out, the airplane exploded. So he told me, he said, the next thing that I remember was pulling the ripcord when I woke up for a couple of seconds. And he said, then I landed on the ground in France somewhere. And he said, the only thing I remember was getting rid of my parachute because the wind was blowing pretty good. And then I crawled into the surrounding terrain field of some sort, whether it was grain or corn, I don't know what they had over there at the time. He didn't mention it. But he said he could hear the German armored cars and tanks and stuff coming to search for him, and they evidently missed him because when he woke up again, it was dark, and so he crawled to the side of the field, and the resistance found him, and they took him to Paris, and he recovered from his injuries that he sustained, and was smuggled back from Paris back to across the English Channel to England, and then back to the States. So that was his story. So that DFC meant a little bit to me. He got that for his survival, if you will, and that mission.
Did you feel that was a legacy that you wanted to live up to in your own service? Did it push you towards a career in the service itself?
It did, but I think Mr. Mudge has a much more of an impact on that decision. I always wanted to fly, so he was a ground marine, and he saw a lot of Chinese coming at him and killed a lot of them. But I wanted to be an aviator because I watched a lot of aviation films when I was a child, and I wanted to be a Marine, but I also wanted to be an aviator, and so that's why I selected the Marine Corps and the platoon leaders class. I graduated from high school and went to the platoon leaders class system, and they were kind enough to send me back to college for 4 years. And when I graduated, they made me a second lieutenant and then sent me to flight school. And I worked from that point for the next 18 months to be a naval aviator, and was able to accomplish that much of my quest.
And what year would this have been that you qualified as a naval aviator?
Well, let's see. We landed on the USS Lexington, both day and night qualification in August of 1966. And I received my wings December 20th of that same year, 1966, after undergoing helicopter pilot training. I wanted to be an F-8 fighter pilot, along with 14 other second lieutenants who had gone to flight school, along with a number of Navy ensigns in our flight school class. And we all had grades good enough to go fly jets. And the Commandant of the Marine Corps said, not so fast, gentlemen. We have no need for jet fixed-wing pilots. We have a need for helicopter pilots, because Vietnam War was raging at that time. So we're all assigned to fly helicopters, and we all completed our flight training at Ellison Field, and then went on to be assigned to various squadrons to fly helicopters.
So while you were in training, Vietnam had already begun, and were you kind of under no under no illusions that once you qualified, you'd be finding yourself over in Vietnam in the near future?
That wasn't a real consideration, because I think at that age, when you're 21 or 22, you're sort of fearless. You think you're invincible. A lot of us young guys in those days did that. We were driving Corvettes, and bachelors, and we were having a pretty good time for ourselves. But when I learned that there were two types of helicopters that were available to fly, one is the CH-46, which is a medium helicopter. The other is the larger one, the Sea Stallion, which was a CH-53, a much bigger and faster and, in my opinion, beautiful airplane. So my roommate for the last 18 months of flight school and I both raced on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day to get to California so we could join the first CH-53 squadron that was ever created. And it was a brand new airplane and never seen combat. We put together the squadron and went to Vietnam after a couple of hiccups that we had. We had an airplane that had a hard landing and broke part of the tail off, so they had to do some rehab on the stringers in the tail of the machine before it could go back to combat. They also had 6 of those same squadron airplanes in Vietnam that had gone over with a detachment in December of 66, and we went over in June of 1967. And we, again, were 24 airplanes, and we were the first squadron to fly these airplanes in combat.
Where were you based in Vietnam, and what was the role of the squadron?
Well, the squadron was a heavy lift and support squadron. We carried in the standard configuration, 45 troops. In Vietnam, we were carrying 60. We took the troop seats out, and they sat on the ground or on the deck of the cargo bay, and we were carrying 60 American troops and many more ARVN troops. But that was the primary mission, and I served 3 tours in Vietnam, one in 1967 to 68, and then I had opportunity to come back in late 1970, and then flew in Laos in Lam Son 719. That was a major operation that the South Vietnamese had, where they had they had the idea finally to go across the border and cut the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And we did work there. And then the CH-53 later on was used. And again, I was in that squadron that deployed back to North Vietnam to do airborne mine countermeasures, where we were doing a mine sweeping mission to facilitate the release of the prisoners from North Vietnam. Excuse me. Those are basically the missions that I participated in Vietnam. There's a number of stories to go with those 3 combat tours. Be happy to share with you.
I'd love to hear them, please. I'd love to hear, like, really what there's always that moment where was this the first time ever for you leaving the States and going to the other side of the world?
Oh yeah, this was my maiden voyage. We went across, and we did the standard thing when you cross the date line and all that good stuff. And we did an awful lot of preparation en route once we got there. In fact, I got there the first day that we offloaded the ship from 50 miles out. We took all 24 airplanes off and flew them to Marble Mountain Air Facility, which was located about 6 or 7 miles from Da Nang, which was the largest airfield, military and civilian, both airfield in I Corps, which was the northern portion of Vietnam. And we offloaded our airplane that day, and I was a co-pilot, young behind the ears, first lieutenant, and the captain who was flying was a guy named Kennedy, and Frank Kennedy and I were put on a mission to go up north to Phu Bai and move some rice and other supplies for the ARVNs to 3 separate locations. And we went out, and in my book I described the mission in detail, but to make a long story short, we made 3 approaches and 3 sorties to each of these locations. And every time we went in, a thing that I noticed the most was the huge rotor wash that blew dirt and sand all over everything. First one we went in, poor little girl was standing about 50 feet away, and she'd rolled her up in a little ball, and fortunately her daddy grabbed her, and she didn't get hurt. But I knew from that time on that any time we were working there, we were sending out a signal to the bad guys that, hey, we're here. So we had to be very careful on how we handled ingress, egress to those sites. Normally, you had to do type spiral approaches over the landing zone so that you reduced your time in the range of enemy fire. But we did 3 of those sorties, and the last one was out towards, excuse me, that's the allergies, towards the South China Sea, and we dropped the last load, and I'm sitting in a co-pilot seat, and I look out the window, and the gunner comes up on the ICS system, inter-system communication system, and says, I got a guy over here with a pointed hat and black pajamas with an AK-47 that's pointing at us, Captain, can I shoot? And he said, no, don't shoot. About that time, he pulled collective and pulled up and dusted the guy. He blew him back in his hole. So my first day in Vietnam, not only did I get to see the countryside, but I got to see my first Viet Cong, and I didn't get shot. So I was a happy camper that first day.
Is there any particular difficulties that come with flying over jungle? I believe it's quite mountainous as well, part of Vietnam.
Vietnam is an I-Corps is a beautiful place. It really has some outstanding features to it. The white sand beaches are really pretty. The coastal plain is almost always completely dotted with rice paddies because that's how they subsist for the most of the part. And then you got a mountain range towards the Laotian border, and you have monsoon conditions, which that mountain system tends to facilitate. For 6 months of the year, Vietnam is cloudy and wet and rainy, and the other 6 months, Laos and Cambodia are rainy and wet. At least that's what I recall. Place is hot and humid, and they got a lot of interesting things. There are tigers. They do have snakes. They have elephants, and they have some bad people. Sometimes, we went there to fight communism, according to what President Kennedy originally wanted us to do back in '62 when he originally started the war. And he indicated that, the Vietnamese people probably wanted to remain nice and free and thrive, but there were certain groups that wanted to take over that nation and instill a communist government. So we were there to if you will, stop that type of endeavor. If history proves me right, I think we won the war on the ground and in the air. However, the Democrat government in 1973, 74, and 75 failed to live up to their commitment to provide support for the Vietnamese government, and they ultimately lost the country to the communists. But to go back to the story of how you can tell one guy whether you're good guys from bad
that
guys.
Sounds like a familiar story. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, Colonel, I lost you a bit on the bandwidth. I was just saying that sounds like a very familiar story to any Afghanistan veterans listening. I'm sure they're probably nodding their heads along at similar kind of feeling. You mentioned the civilian population. Did you have, obviously your job is in the air, but you've got to live somewhere, right? What was it like? What were the conditions of where you were living like, and did you have much interaction with the civilian population?
Myself personally, yes, I had some significant interaction. Not only did I visit the local exchanges and interact with the civilians that had been cleared and allowed to work there, baker, barbers, for instance, and I'll tell you a barber story here in a minute, but I also was an architectural design minor in college, and so my boss made me the club's officer for Marble Mountain, and he said, we need to build the enlisted folks a new club, the staff NCOs a new club, and the sergeant's a new club. And when you're all done with that, maybe the officer's a new club. So I got to interface with the contractors and the Vietnamese in that area. But that was right in the middle of the Tet Offensive. So it was a little bit of a hard process to get completed because they closed down the base. But going back to the story of how you can tell the good guys from the bad guys, as a young first lieutenant, I just gotten paid, and I went to the exchange, and they had 4 Vietnamese barbers, and they were all there. They didn't speak much English, but they could understand hand signals. So I walked in there, and the guy sort of indicated, here's the chair, and he sort of wanted, what kind of haircut do you want? So I raised my hands and did a high and tight, and he looked at me and shook his head and said, okay. Yeah, it was what I interpreted that. And I said, well, I'm gonna splurge today. I'm gonna get a straight razor shave. So he nodded he could do that too. So I sat down, and he did a really fine job on giving me a nice Marine Corps haircut. And so I looked at the look in his eye, just for some reason gave me pause. And I don't know what it was, but it's just something in the back of your mind that didn't look right. And I thought twice about the straight razor shave, and I said, oh, what the hell, I'll let him do it. So back I go. He gets the razor out, whack, whack, whack. He gives me a very, very nice, close, straight razor shave. And so I paid the guy. Didn't think anything more of it. The next day, actually that night, we had a rocket attack on the base, and we also had sappers try to come through the back fence, and the Marine sentries got them all on the wire and killed all 4 of them that were coming across the wire. 4 or 5. And as part of the investigation, intelligence gathering, they took pictures of all these guys, including their facial pictures, and they posted them on the ready room board. And I walked up and looked at the board, and I looked at number 3, and lo and behold, it was a guy who gave me the straight razor shave the day before. And I said to myself, I could be lying in the morgue right now if that guy had decided he was going to exercise his VC talent on me instead of trying to come across and blow up helicopters.
Oh, so that's what they try and do. They try and get onto the base and put charges on the helicopters, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. They tried to get in and blow them up, and but he had supposedly been cleared. So it sort of goes back to, it's difficult in wartime sometimes to figure out who are the good guys and who are the bad guys.
And how often was the base at Marble Mountain? You mentioned the rocket attacks. Was that quite a frequent occurrence that you'd come under attack?
It was initially when we got there with the 53s. However, the Viet Cong and the NVA soldiers who were filtering down from the north were more interested in hitting the airfield at Da Nang. And that was only 7 miles away. And we did a lot of what you might call hunter-killer missions that I think the guys in Afghanistan or in probably Iraq would have done also. And that's to send out or to have 3 hunter-killer group guys and then 1 flare ship to light up the area. And we were equipped to do the flare mission. We went out one day and actually one night, and we're dropping flares. And again, here's another story of who the good guys and who the bad guys are. The 1,000,000 candle power flares we dropped from about 3,000 feet, and the Huey Cobra was the in fact, 2 Cobras were part of the hunter-killer group, and one UH-1N, who was the on-site commander. And we went out and dropped flares, and about 11 o'clock at night, we spotted 50 to 70 people walking up a river, side of the river with what looked like rockets and launchers. And so they looked at it and said, well, that looks like the bad guys are getting ready to set up to shoot at Da Nang. So part of the protocol in those days was to call the village chief before you could fire on anybody. So the guy gets on the radio, the squad commander for the mission, and he calls, and the guy answers the radio on about the 4th call, and he said, I'll get the village chief to see if it's okay to shoot. And the radio was dead. We fly around for another 10 minutes, and I dropped another 2 more flares because I was a flare bird. And we're watching these people buggy up the river, and he calls again and says to the liaison officer, these guys look like they're getting ready to set up and shoot. You got any word from the village chief yet? He said, no, we haven't heard anything from the village chief. So they continued to orbit, and another 5 minutes goes by, and they're all set up. And the guy calls once more and says, they're about to fire. You got any word from the village chief? He said, no, we still don't have anything. So the people on the ground light them all off, and they sent probably 40 rockets, 122 millimeter rockets at Da Nang, and you could see the explosions 7 miles away. And they were pretty good with very crude sighting mechanisms. And then, to make a long story short, they were all gone. They just started to evaporate and disappear. They just went into the rice paddies and disappeared. And about 3 minutes later, the liaison officer comes back up on the radio and says, village chief says you can fire now. So, it was rather obvious that they didn't want those people to be terminated. And so, again, you were never quite sure who the good guys were or bad guys. Could have been that they had a gun to the village chief's head, or they may have taken his wife, or they may have, threatened him. That may have been the reason. You never really knew. So, but those were the things that tended to be a little bit disconcerting for people that were trying to accomplish the mission. And that was our main focus, was getting the job done.
It sounds like you're on very strict rules of engagement for this first of your deployments.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't that way in the second go-around. The second tour in 1971, when we were flying in Laos, we didn't have any restrictions on fire, and the aircraft commander had the option to authorize his gunners to shoot at anybody who was shooting back at them.
So when you were on these strict rules of engagement, was that a source of frustration for you guys?
Somewhat. I think more the fact that you couldn't get the job done was the main thing. And I'm sure that's been the modus operandi with people trying to control how the military operates in both probably Iraq and Afghanistan. Everybody's so worried about civilian casualties that the mission tends to not get completed, and or you lose some of your own assets by doing the less prudent thing, in my estimation.
And so I just want to make sure I'm clear on this, how these missions worked as well. So you'd be up in the 53, you'd be putting out these incredibly powerful flares to literally light up the countryside.
Yeah.
And then these Cobras and Huey gunships, if you got clearance, then they'd come in, rockets, guns, that kind of thing, and take the targets on.
Yeah, the Huey had a 1,000,000 candle power flare or spotlight on it. One of those great big huge spotlights, so they could light up the whole river. But we dropped the flares to get about a 3-mile radius around that. The real combat for the 53, which is, in my estimation, one of the most superior helicopters that they've ever made. It can do loops and rolls. In Laos, when we were flying, it was not unheard of to be carrying a 14,000-pound 155 howitzer externally and use 80-degree angle of bank to get the weapon to the fire support base. So we were doing a lot more enemy combat type missions in this second tour. Unfortunately, the first tour, because we were new aircraft, the general didn't want to lose the 53, so he sort of pushed us to the rear, and we didn't do a lot of the things that the H-46s were called on to do. Of my flight school class, for instance, we had 14 first lieutenants, all flying helicopters, go through the program, and 7 went to the H-46 program, and 7 of us went to the 53 program. And after the first tour in Vietnam, there were 3 of us left in the 53s, and there were none in the 46s. So our flight school class didn't do well as far as survivability on our first tour in Vietnam. So.
And that was killed and wounded in that first deployment.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
was that quite typical for helicopter crews in Vietnam? That kind of level of loss.
It was partly mechanical failure for the H-46s. There were a lot of that, but there were a lot of shoot down failures. The 2 losses, 2 airplanes that we lost, where we lost people in the first tour. They beaconed or they set up a navigational aid that was false, and my roommate and his buddy, who was also married but a flight school classmate of mine, was coming back from Dong Ha with a load of, I think it was 20 medevacs and 5 medics to tend them, and they did an IFR in flight plan in the clouds, and the navigation aid was sucked off to the side, and they ended up crashing into the side of a mountain and killed everybody. They didn't find them for 8 months, but that's the type of activity that the 53 guys were more involved in the first tour. Second tour, we only lost 2 airplanes, and both of those were from direct enemy action in Laos. And one of my fondest memories, and the thing I'm probably most proud of, is rescuing a downed crew from a crashed H-53 in Laos after we had been hauling artillery pieces out of the fire support base to another fire support base, and we took a lot of fire, 50 caliber, and the rescue ladder that I had was the only one we had in the squadrons, and I was lucky enough to be able to get down and pick up those folks after we had been shot out of the zone a couple of times. So,
Can you talk us through that mission in a bit more detail, please?
that's part of Lamson 719. And you were talking earlier about losses. The Army in 3 weeks, who provided the lion's share of helicopter support to the ARVIDs, because the ARVID Air Force didn't have any helicopters per se to support that. Army lost 102 helicopters in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And fortunately, most of the crews survived, but they lost a lot of machines. But that mission that day was to take 4 53s north to Quezon and get briefed by the Army to support the Laotian troops in Laos. And our mission, because we were heavy lift, was to carry bulldozers and 155 and 105 howitzers from fire support base to fire support base, and also supply, 15,000 pounds per load of ammunition, if necessary, from one place to another. That day, we had our flight leader go down, and I was the alternate flight leader. So I took over for the flight, and we did the morning mission. We moved the support materials from LZ Kilo, which was at Quezon Fire Base, to various fire support bases inside Laos, all the way up to the town of Chapon. And when we finished that, we came back, and the second part of the mission was to move 2 155s and 4 105 artillery pieces from Hotel 2, which was a fire support base south of the other support bases, to an area that was closer to the internal part of Laos. And we started that mission, and we got no guns out. We went in and we immediately got mortared and 50 calibered, and we had 4 Cobras from the Marine support squadron that was flying for us, flying 1Js, and they did a fantastic job of, putting ordnance on the targets and trying to suppress the incoming fire. And we made numerous attempts to get those guns out, and we were unsuccessful. And every time we got close to the place had erupted in mortar fire and 50 cals. So we ended up going back to refuel, and I get cut back. And we all landed at LZ Kilo after refueling it. My Cobras, which were Marine escorts, had all been shot up. And so they all had systems that were not capable of supporting us anymore. So as the flight leader, I sent them all home and said, you guys, thanks for the work, and you did a fantastic job. In fact, that flight leader of that Cobra group got a Silver Star for his work that day. So he shoved off, and we went and refueled and shut down at the LZ, and I checked my other birds, the other 2, and they were all okay. We had some damage, but nothing that would prohibit mission accomplishment. And the flight leader came back, and he was the squadron operations officer, and I was newly appointed, if you will, recommissioned captain. So he took over the flight again, and about this time, I'm on my way over to to the command center, and he comes back, and before he gets on the ground, this Army 1-star comes over and didn't grab me, but he came into my face and basically said, "Captain, you understand that's a mandatory mission?" And I said, "Well, General, if you don't suppress the fire, we got to get some artillery, some fixed-wing aviation, more support on that place, because if I take my birds back there, I'm going to lose one." And he said, "Well, I don't understand that. You don't understand what a mandatory mission is." And I said, "I understand." And about that time, the flight leader showed up. So he took over, and they went in and briefed with the Army command and control, and they put together a artillery and 4 new Army Cobras and 6 flights of fixed wing, and we were fortunate enough to go out at it was almost dusk when we started, and we pulled the 2 155s out. He got one, and his wingman got one, and they were slick. They didn't have any gun ammunition. Sometimes the ARVNs would attach ammunition to the gun itself, so that when you got to where you were going, you already had the ammunition with the gun. And we'd already taken 105 ammunition to the location where we were going to drop the guns. So 105s didn't have that, but the 155s did. So it was about 19,000 pound lift to pull those out in outside air temperature of 95 degrees. So it was pushing the parameters of the machine to be able to do all that. Plus, these guns were in a series of revetments where they were in a hole, if you will, built with logs around them. So you had to lift this entire process out of the hole and off to fly. So anyway, we went back, and he and his wingman got the first 2, and the wingman, I went in and got the first 105, and my wingman came in and got the second 105 while these guys were just working the hell out of the south and the west side of the fire support base, where we were taking 50 caliber and mortar fire, small arms fire. The main problem of getting the ARVNs to come out and hook up the sling to the cargo hook was the main issue with having to stay in the zone longer than you needed to. But finally, we got 4 of the 6 mandatory guns out of the zone, took them to Delta 1, which was about a 25, 30-mile trip, put them in, and immediately the ARVN gunners, when we put them into their fire support holes, grabbed the ammunition and started shooting to the west. So they were needed badly out there. So we understood what the mandatory mission was. But when we had deposited all 4 of the 6 guns, the flight leader sent the other 2 birds back, and he said to me, "You and I'll go back into the zone and get the last 2 guns." And I said, "Okay." And off we went. The other 2 guys went back to Quezon, refueled, and headed for home because the weather was starting to get bad and it was getting dark. And so we went back, and he made a spiral approach and went into the zone, and he was shot out of the zone 3 different times because of the mortar fire primarily, and the red dust was just all over thick. You had visibility problems, which helped a little bit with the bad gunners, the bad guys' gunners being able to spot you, but you were able to keep contact with the ground by staying fairly low level. But he came around on the fourth approach, he finally got the gun hooked up because the crew chief, guy named Ford, had to reach down through the hell hole, which is in the center of the helicopter, and lying on his stomach. And because the Vietnamese guy wouldn't come out and hook him up, he had to reach down on the gun top and pick up that sling and put it over the hook. They were just starting to lift out of the zone, and he had hit with, probably 7 or 8 mortars right on top of the rotor system. And I heard him call, and he said, we're hit. We're going down in the zone. So he moved over a little bit and flopped down next to the gun. And the crew and I were sitting there at 3,000 feet and watched all of this transpire. And I said to the crew, they're down, and we got brothers in the zone. Now, I want to make sure everybody's on board with us. We're going to go try to get them. Is everybody on board? And they said, yeah, Captain. And they all puttied up to saying, yep, we're good to go. And so down we went. We kicked the rescue ladder out, 75-foot rescue ladder out the back of the airplane, and came into a hover and started looking for him. And here's the downed airplane down there. The crew had exited. The crew chief, our crew chief, had seen the crew go out the back ramp and into a pit, a trench, and he thought that was all of the people that were in the airplane. Well, unbeknownst, the pilot and the co-pilot were still in the airplane. The co-pilot had opened his side window, and because he'd taken a 50 cal in the leg, he had fallen out and was laying on the ground. The operations officer went out, and somebody said, well, the airplane's on fire. Well, it really wasn't, but it was smoking, and aviation gas was running all over the place. So he ended up going around and taking the lieutenant colonel who was about to become our squadron commander 3 days hence if he had not had 50 cal in his leg, drug him around, pulled him into a foxhole, and got medical aid for him. And we are hovering over here with a rescue ladder hanging out and taking fire. My right gunner had his 50 cal had jammed, so the crew chief came up, and we were taking a lot of fire from a 50 that was probably 100 yards away, and he got the gun unjammed, and the gunner put 3 rounds in that guy that was shooting at us and took care of him. In the meantime, the crew chief went back to the tail and maneuvered me around to the point where we could get the rescue ladder down to the area close to the trench, and 5 guys popped out of the trench and came over to the rescue ladder, and they were unable to climb the ladder. They could get up a couple of rungs, and they all took their D-rings and hooked onto the ladder. And so that was as we had trained. So as I asked the crew chiefs, we got the whole crew, and he said, yeah, we got 5 guys on the rescue ladder. And that's what we were supposed to have, was 5 guys in the airplane. Well, unbeknownst to me, somebody had come along on his airplane that wasn't supposed to be there. But at any rate, off we go, and we're climbing up. I called the guy, Major Close, who was Red Dragon 28. I'll never forget that call sign. And he had told me not to go in to start with, and I said, well, we're already committed. And so came out, and he said, well, I'm going in and get the 2 pilots. And I said, 2 pilots? 2 pilots are on my rescue ladder. Said, oh, no, they're not. So he went in, picked them up with his Huey, and because he could still get in his own. The blades from the 53 had blocked part of the landing zone, but he was still small enough that he could get in and pick them up. So we proceeded at 30 knots, carrying these guys on the rescue ladder hanging down 75 feet below the airplane. 30 knots trying to get back across the South Vietnam border to a place where we could land and get him back inside the airplane. So we got over to Lang Bay and touched down and set him down on the ground, sat down next to him, and Major Close brought the two pilots over, and we all joined up. Had a little bit of a problem with my operations officer. He wanted me to take the lieutenant colonel directly to Dong Ha, which was about 80 miles away, for medical treatment. And I said, Major, look at the gas gauge. We got 200 pounds of fuel left in each. We got lucky to get to Quezon. And he didn't want to listen to me. Obviously, he was in shock from being on the ground and that type of stuff. So the fog of war had him good. But at any rate, make a long story short, we went to Quezon. Medical folks looked at the colonel, and he said, the medic said, Colonel needs to go to Dong Ha immediately. So we refueled, went to Dong Ha, landed, and they came and got him with an ambulance, took him to the medical facility. And we're just getting refueled and getting ready to go home. And here they come back out and saying, oops, we can't do anything for him here. We don't have the proper medical facilities to operate on his leg. It's very badly damaged. So he ended up coming back on board on a stretcher, and we, at that time, because the weather had closed and the monsoon season had dropped right on us, so we had to file an instrument flight plan to go back. And unfortunately, a lot of the shrapnel had damaged the windscreens. So as we took off and got into the monsoon rain, water started coming into the cockpit. So that made life much more interesting. So changed altitudes and asked the controller to get me out of the weather, and I wanted to go from 6,000 to 8,000 feet, knowing that normal monsoon tops were about 7. We popped out at 7, and the crew chief and one of the gunners mopped up the stuff. We were able to not lose any avionics equipment while we were headed back. And we dropped the colonel off at Charlie Med. That made for an 18-hour flight day, and that was part of the story.
So I've got a few questions on this, Joe. So when you said that the guys were working over the hillsides, so that as in that was the fixed wing aircraft dropping bombs, guns, that kind of thing.
They were using all kinds of stuff. Originally, they'd called a artillery mission in, and on both the south and the west side, and then they had fixed wing working with high explosives. They didn't use napalm when we were there, but they used cluster bombs. They used all kinds of stuff to try to suppress the firing. The bad guys wanted one of those helicopters, and they got one that day, but I went back 2 days later, and they had increased their capability on the North Vietnamese side. They'd brought in airburst weapons, and so I took an airburst at 3,000 feet through the rotor system, came up through the ramp, through the just past the drive shaft for the tail rotor, cut one of the lines through the rotor system and exploded about 30 feet above the rotor system. If it had hit a blade, I wouldn't be talking to you today. So when we got back, landed to do an evaluation of whether the airplane was flyable or not, and I knew God was looking out for me, because if that thing had hit one of those blades, we never would have survived. And it went right through the middle of it, and that thing is turning it at 700 RPM.
So when you talk about airbursts, is that like almost like flak, like World War II kind of flak exploded?
Just like 12 o'clock high in the day, our old guy's day, back there in the B-29 and the B-17 issues. That's what it reminded me of when I watched it. We had the North Vietnamese had brought down 23 millimeter, 37 millimeter, and towards the end, 57 millimeter anti-aircraft. Fortunately, they had EA-6Bs off the carrier that were suppressing the radar. So they had to do ground tracking to try to get us. And so that wasn't as effective as it would have been if they'd been able to use the radar. So we were fortunate not to have lost too many more airplanes. But we never did get the 2 guns out of Hotel 2. And that was where I took the airburst, trying to get the last 2 guns out 2 days later, and just couldn't do it. So they ended up blowing that airplane up so that nobody could get any of it, and they also blew the guns in place. Vietnamese were there for three weeks in their operation, and they declared it a victory and withdrew. And by the time they had got back across the border, Ho Chi Minh Trail was back open again. Yeah.
So when you were hovering over with the rescue ladder, are you seeing the tracer going by the windscreen and?
Oh yeah, and hearing it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. When it goes, I came back and I had a nickname with the lines. Gunny, the line chief, and he used to call me the bullet magnet. I came back with 257 holes in the airplane that day. And it flew fine. Good.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible that airframe can keep going after taking that kind of punishment.
That's a fine machine. It really is.
I guess the other kind of question I have on this is, you've got fixed wings in the air, you've got gunships in the air, you've got artillery in, that kind of doing their fires. The level of coordination that must be going on for you to come in and not, even just collide with another aircraft, let alone get in each other's fires and that kind of thing. How is this all being controlled? Who's moving where and when?
Well, the on-site control for all of that was that Red Dragon 28. He was I can't remember the terminology because it's been 50 years, but he was the on-site commander, and he controlled all of the support activities, including his 4 Cobras who were flying close support for us as we were going in. As we were sitting there in a hover, and you could hear the Cobras working at the mortar positions and so on, and it just, they were bound and determined to get us, and the other guys were bound and determined to keep their heads down. So it was sort of a standoff, and we got the job done. But that Red Dragon 28 did all of that combined support activity coordination, and he did a fine job that day. He really did. The pilot, my operations officer, got a Silver Star for pulling the co-pilot to safety, and that was a great thing. He did, he risked his life to get that Lieutenant Colonel some aid and get him out. So it was great.
Well, it sounds like you all risked your lives for each other, which, of course, is what being a Marine is all about. I'm sure you'd agree. And I wanted to ask you more about your crew. It sounds like your crew all stood up when it counted, as well. What was when you came back? If it was a Top Gun movie, everybody's high-fiving afterwards. I'm sure it was very different to that. Like after a mission like that, and as an officer, What do you do with your men after a mission like that? How do you speak to them? How do you look to your men?
On that particular evolution, we agreed to all meet at Sergeant Pogani's hooch. That's what we lived in. the old wooden with corrugated metal roofs with drop-down corrugated things and screens. That's how we were living in those days. No air conditioning, no nothing. But we were to meet there. I asked them all to join me there, and we, en route, I went by and hustled 2 cases of beer and a fifth of whiskey, and we all met the 2 gutters and Bogani and my co-pilot, the guy named Dan Silver. Poor old Dan was this was his first mission in Vietnam, flying in Laos on his first day after 5 days of acclimatization. And we all sat there and talked about the mission, and I thanked everyone for all of their work, because without all of their efforts, we probably wouldn't have made it. So the gunners were working hard, and crew chief was outstanding. In fact, Progani's probably the best CH-53 crew chief in the Marine Corps from that day forward. Now, the new 53s are not in the same game. They're in a heavy lift mode where they don't do angle of bank of 80 degrees, that type of thing, because they're a much, much heavier machine. This thing was gross weight was about 42,000 pounds. The new machines are 70,000 pounds. So they're not as maneuverable. They're not as, if you will, in my estimation, pilot friendly. Because I flew one of the K models later on, or E model, excuse me, and did air-to-air refueling, which was unheard of in the start of the 53s in both the A and D models of the machine. So, but still a super machine, not as maneuverable. But the 53D, in my estimation, is if you get a chance to look at the front of the book, that has a picture of the 53D on it. It's a sleek, good-looking machine.
Beautiful aircraft. If I remember correctly, that it will be the new models you were talking about. I seem to recall the Marines in Helmand Province using those. I mean, I always find it incredible that an aircraft, admittedly with different iterations, can have, like when you look at the Second World War, they were coming up with a new aircraft every year or two, and the fact that something can have gone from Vietnam and is still in service today, I think is just incredible bit of engineering. Okay, so Colonel, I know obviously you have hours and hours of Vietnam stories. The good news is that people can read more about those from the book, but I'd like to change tact a little now and talk about more about basically the responsibilities of command and the lessons of command that you learned throughout your long career. When you went to Vietnam as a young officer, I'm sure by the time you'd finished your 3rd tour, you'd learned a lot. What was it that combat told you about leading men? What was some of the most impactful lessons that you took away from that experience?
Oh, I think the most important concept that I gleaned was that you need to take care of your men first. That has to be an officer and a leader's primary responsibility, along with mission accomplishment. And if you don't take care of the troops, they're not going to take care of you. So, I had the opportunity to command 2 squadrons and an air station. I was also the maintenance officer of a heavy helicopter squadron, where I had 125 mechanics, if you will, avionics, hydraulics, metalsmiths, supply chiefs, supply clerks, those type of Marines, all working together to accomplish the mission. And that was one of the things that I tried to instill in all of the Marines that I worked with, the concept of mission accomplishment and getting the job done, do it safely, but get it done. And you got to find a way to adapt, overcome, and get the job done. And that was the hallmark of what I learned in combat. Later on, I wanted to make sure that I applied to all of my Marines, especially in my command opportunities, that they were all treated like Green Marines. I didn't care what color they were, what sex they were, what religion they were all the same, and I treated everybody equally. And that went a long way to cementing a good relationship with the troops. They knew that if I had to discipline them, that I would discipline the individual from one to another exactly the same, and I wouldn't play favorites. So there are some again stories where I differed with my superiors on treatment of people, because I had one full colonel tell me that his sergeant who worked directly for him was so good that I shouldn't punish him like I had the other people that had broken the rules and were subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So he and I didn't agree, and I sort of won out to start with, but he overturned me anyway. So, but that business of white or black and not being able to see shades of gray, there needs to be accountability to your actions, and that is one of the stalwart principles, in my estimation, of leadership. You got to be able to hold people accountable for what they do, and if you don't, then you're going to end up with anarchy.
And what's it like when you're working on an aircraft together in a small crew? Does that present its own maybe problems or also benefits? Because let's say you were commanding a platoon of 30 men, and you've got your squads and everything, and you don't see so much of each other. But when you're in such an intimate crew, does that change the dynamics at all, or is there a way that you have to maybe balance things a little different as an officer with the enlisted men in the back of the aircraft?
I think there's an accommodation to make sure that you know who they are and what their backgrounds are, and you don't have to get what they call familiar. You don't need to know the names of their children and their wife, but you need to know what their capabilities are and what they have been doing. And I'll give you an example. I took most of my crew in my maintenance job that did work on an airplane that I was going to go out and test fly. They got to fly with me. So they knew quite well that if they didn't do a good job, it was their butt on the line as well as mine. So, but there's a line where you can be knowledgeable, but familiar. Now, in the days of being retired, I'm friends with a lot of these young individuals who were at the one time working with me. Pogani, that crew chief that I talked about earlier, he and I still correspond and attend reunions together once in a while. So it's a fine line, but it's a good line. And I familiarity is the mother of contempt. Is I don't think a proper mechanism to judge the relationship. You got to know enough to be able to deal with the folks. But again, I hearken back to the mission accomplishment, that getting it done is a lot of, if you can instill that with the troops, if they want to do it as bad as you do, then it's going to get done. And that happens. The squadron that I was in, my boss, Colonel Jim Shelton, was a superior officer. He was kind enough to select me to become his aircraft maintenance officer and let me have my own head, if you will, and do my own job. He supported me all the way, and the mission, when I got there was one airplane out of 18 we had on hand. And when I left, we had 100% operational readiness. So that, instilling that in the troops, even during the Jimmy Carter era, when there weren't parts and there weren't gas to fly a lot, was a major accomplishment. And again, in the book, I highlight a lot of that stuff that Colonel Shelton did. He was a superior leader.
Were your men all volunteers, or were there draftees mixed in with the unit as well? And if so, was there a difference in, did you find that they needed handling in any different ways when someone's not a volunteer in the services?
I had no really knowledge of anybody who was a draftee. Nobody owned up to it, and nobody trumpeted it when I was in Vietnam the first couple of times. And again, they were all Marines, and once I think they got to be Marines, whether they were draftees or regulars, they didn't care. I don't think the Marine Corps took a lot of draftees, but if they did, they got their orientation at boot camp, and I think that probably straightened them out a little bit. And they didn't have that anti-war bent, if you will. Even later, when there were people that were still left over from Vietnam and new people coming in, there was still a lot of camaraderie, and there was not this anti-military feeling.
Did you ever come across any Marines, maybe senior NCOs, who had served in the Second World War, Korea, and Vietnam?
The only one that I knew of that had served in Korea was Mr. Mudge, and that was the only one that I had. We had a lot of outstanding staff NCOs, all the way up from sergeant majors down to corporals. And I had a corporal who served with me when I was a brand new lieutenant and helped me because I was a new ordnance officer and received the initial issue of weapons and ammunition for a squadron that was deploying for its first time. And that included 50 caliber machine guns, M60 machine guns, 24 law anti-tank weapons, 250,000 rounds of belted, 50,000 rounds of belted 50 caliber and 750,000 rounds of M60. And we had no place to put it. So between the corporal and his lance corporal, we and myself, we worked out a deal to commandeer an old bunker and put that stuff into the bunker. But without that corporal's knowledge and ability to think outside the box, if you will, and to adapt, he saved the day for us. And it was his idea, and I in the book give him credit for it. He's the same corporal who helped me when we got to Vietnam. We had all this ammunition sitting on the flight line waiting to have a rocket hit it. Said we figured out what are we going to do with that? Nobody wants it. We don't have any place, the Air Base Squadron can't take it, so we better figure out what to do with it. So we built our own bunker, and he designed it, and we built it, and it was the first bunker that was built out of sand and concrete and Marston matting that had ever passed the wing inspector's approval. So we put all of the ammunition and stuff inside there for the squadron for the next 5 years. It basically operated until we left Vietnam in 1971, where the squadron went to Hawaii from Vietnam. I flew in with the first squadron of 53s, and I was the last guy to leave out of Vietnam in 1971. So I came with the first part, and I left as the embarkation officer when it left. Yeah.
What were your feelings at the when operations in Vietnam ended, and then when the North Vietnamese took over South Vietnam?
Well, when I left in 71, I was headed for Okinawa because I hadn't done my complete 12-month tour, overseas tour. So they said, well, you got to go to Okinawa for 3 more months to fill out your overseas tour. So as I got on the airplane, I thought, boy, I hope I don't have to come back here again. Nice place, but I think I've had enough for a while. And 10 months later, we were sailing for North Vietnam to do airborne mine countermeasures, minesweeping activities. So that was a good mission, only because it facilitated the release of the prisoners from North Vietnam. Shitty mission, pardon the French, but it was not a good mission for the airplane. Flying at 75 feet above the ocean, dragging either a Mark 105 hydrofoil sled or metallic orange poles, which were magnetized. All the mines in those days were magnetic and acoustic, so you had to detonate them with either a magnetized pipe or rattle bars that they had behind the poles. Or if you had the 105 sled, it generated both an acoustic and a magnetic signal with a self-contained jet engine on the sled itself, but 800 feet behind the helicopter, and you're detonating 255 pounds, 500 pounds, 5,000 pound and 2,000 pound ammunition that's laying on the floor of these rivers and streams and harbors. And fortunately, all the mines in those days had self-destruct mechanisms except the 2,000 pound ones. And the Navy had to go in and get rid of those. But we did the other ones. They all self-destructed before we exploded, and many of them. I think the Navy, who was also participating in this minesweeping activity, blew up one mine in 9 months of minesweeping. But they all blew themselves up, and we verified that the mines had been removed to the North Vietnamese.
And this was what, like part of the agreement for prisoners of war to be released? Yes,
that was a major condition for the release. We had to, the United States government had to certify that the mines had been removed, and they used what they call a radis system, which is a navigation system they dropped in the water, and it plotted the evolutions of the minesweeping activities back and forth across the minefield. And you had to do a certain number of passes because the mines were set up not only to explode on the first one, but some of them didn't go off till the third or the fifth or the seventh. So you had to cover all of the types of settings that the mine could be set for. So we spent a lot of time dragging stuff around the North Vietnamese coastline and in their harbors and in their rivers that we bombed. Sometimes the boys who dropped them didn't quite get them where they were supposed to go, like some missed 5 miles. So fixed wing guys.
And then when you were a peacetime Marine, is there any differences in how you have to treat the men and because presumably in war everyone knows their butts on the line, so there's a fair bit of self-motivation involved in there, if not for self-preservation, and you've got that job that a lot of people have joined for, to do that job. When you've got guys who have been in an active war zone and are now at peace, is there any challenges that come with that as a commander?
I think the hardest thing is to keep the troops motivated, to give them challenges and measurable goals that they can accomplish as individuals and also as small groups, and to support the major goal of the organization. Go back to the maintenance activities again. If the hydraulics guy knows that if he doesn't perform well, then he's going to let down not only his shop, but his NCOIC, non-commissioned officer in charge, and the lieutenant who is in charge of the hydraulic shop, and the maintenance chief, and the maintenance officer, and finally the CO. So he has some motivations to make sure that he does the job right, and he does it safely and correctly. And again, some of that motivation, even in peacetime, is if your butt is on the line when you finish your job and you get in the airplane and it crashes, you've had a problem, So these guys, that type of motivation, you can do the same thing with vehicles. When I had my first command, which was a Marine Air Bases Squadron, we were support activities for the air group that we were part of. And that was during the Carter administration. And like I said, we didn't have very much gas, oil, or ability to get parts. So we motivated our guys by trying to keep operational readiness of equipment. And we asked the troops, said, how can we do this? What's the best way that we can come up with a scenario, a strategy to keep these machines running? And one staff NCO came up and said, well, Major, if we go over to the salvage yard over there at the Air Force Base, they got the same kind of equipment over there. And I bet you we can scrounge up a few parts off of those machines. And sure enough, I said to the staff NCO, excuse me, okay, take one of our 6x and, well, excuse me, I have allergies, and go over and see what you can find. And he came back, and we were able to put 2 more vehicles back in service. And we limped along like that for 2 years, keeping just enough to keep the air group supported as they were. Unfortunately, the air group was in as bad a shape as we were because they didn't have any gasoline to train. Their pilots were losing proficiency because there wasn't any fuel to fly airplanes. So that's the type of involved leadership that I think is necessary in peacetime. Can't do that in all the scenarios. You got to be able to tell them and ask them to get the job done. Can't just tell them. It doesn't work that way anymore. They're a lot less inclined to do it if you just tell them, and they're a lot more inclined if you can get them to buy into the task that they want to do.
Colonel, how long was it that you served in the Marines altogether?
25 years, basically. And then I was enlisted for 4 years while I was in college. I went to the platoon leaders class, but I was also an aviation ordnance man, and I loaded 20 millimeter cannons and worked on those guns on FJ-3 fighters for 2 deployments and about every other weekend, summer or weekend training. But that was how I got started.
And when you left the Corps, how did you find the transition into civilian life?
Well, it's interesting because I left the Marine Corps the day that I was supposed to be in the zone to be promoted to the next higher rank. And I left because the individual who I worked for and his predecessor, who was now a 2-star general, my boss was a 1-star, were both either involved or at least facilitated some actions that were, in my estimation, not legal. The fraud, waste, and abuse that I watched as a air station commander, I couldn't tolerate. So that's why I left the Marine Corps. To transition was difficult because I went to a place called Monterey, California, and applied for a job. I had a doctorate degree in education and a master's degree in educational administration, and applied for a college administration position, and couldn't even get an interview. So I got a little perturbed, and I went to the college and I talked to the guy who was in charge of filling the bill, and he basically said, well, I guess he said, was nice enough to call me doctor. He said, Dr. Wemheuer, your resume is fine, but we don't know yet. So why don't you apply for a teacher's position here? And once we get to know you in 5 years, then we might consider you for management. And I said, thank you very much. I don't think I'm really interested in going to teach with you guys for 5 years. So as it was, another Marine back in Southern California had some openings in project management. And so I went to work for Fluor Daniel Corporation and became a project manager for environmental remediation, and did tank removal jobs. I did soil gas extraction type jobs. We remediated gasoline underneath the buildings, which hadn't been done before. Again, thinking outside the box to try to come up with solutions for regulatory closure of a facility that had been under trying to be closed for five years, and they couldn't get closure because every time the tide would change, they'd expose the soil to the gasoline. So at any rate, long story short, we were getting regulatory closure, and my boss said, you got a choice. You want to go to Vegas for 3 weeks on a temporary assignment? And I said, why not? So I went to Vegas, and 13 years later, I left. And I went to high-level nuclear waste repository program under the Department of Energy. So I spent a lot of time in Yucca Mountain in the desert. So that was a whole new story and a whole new set of leadership and problems, and a whole different group of individuals. The transition from being able to ask people to do things and expect them to get done to finding a way to motivate civilians to get that same job done and become excited about the mission. Is a whole new set of leadership skills that you have to develop. So one size doesn't always fit everything. So going from the military to the civilian side is a challenge also.
Is there any part of you that misses, do you ever look back on and think fondly of things? Do you ever think back on and think, I'd love to do, I'd love to do that one more time? Is there any part of you that thinks that?
Oh, I think Vietnam was a challenge, and flying in combat is the ultimate challenge of an aviator. And the one regret I have is I crashed a 53 in 1968 into the South China Sea at night. And unfortunately, we lost a crew member, and for that, I'm forever sorry that that happened. Got spatial disorientation. I thought we got shot down, quite frankly, and it didn't work out that way. So turned upside down and flew into the water about 3 miles from the carrier I was going to. And so again, that's in the book. The story in there is in the book. So it's a regret I have. But to answer your question, I don't think there's anything I would want to go back and do again. I would do the same thing again if I was there, but there's not something that I would change appreciably other than hitting the water.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is if you would do it again. But let me ask you this, Colonel, because I'm sure we've got young people listening to this who are maybe considering a career in the military. Maybe they're already in the military at junior levels or perhaps in training. To them, what are some of the key pieces of advice you'd give to someone looking for both a career in the service and one involving leadership, which of course, occurs at all levels?
That's an interesting question. I would suggest to them that they focus on doing a good job of what they're assigned to do, whether it's turning wrenches or typing typewriters or doing things with a computer or driving a truck. It makes no difference. Do a superior job. Be cognizant of the people around you and treat them with the respect that you would like to be treated with, and work hard and perform well, and that will be the key to your success. Not sitting around or carping about the lousy assignment. If you're sent to the mess hall to peel potatoes, don't carp about it. Go to the mess hall. I did, and become the best potato peeler that they've had in a long time. That word will get back to the people that count. It's important for you to perform, and your character is important too. You need to stay away from drugs, and that is a key to success of a lot of places these days. The drug epidemic is really atrocious, if I be so bold. It's covered and obscured a lot of people. So the death rate from fentanyl, for instance, is 100,000. And I can't imagine that somebody has to pop a pill to be able to exist. If you have that problem, kick it. If marijuana isn't the panacea that everybody seems to think it is, it kills your brain. I know very from experience with a young man that did that, and he basically is a vegetable these days. He can't think for himself. he has trouble tying his shoes. It's long-term use of that stuff is detrimental to you. But nobody wants to hear that. They all want to feel that instant gratification, that high. So if you work hard and you're doing well, just continue on that path, and it will propel you into the future. It will get you that promotion that you're looking for. It'll get you the recognition that you crave. You don't need to get recognition by being high on drugs. You need to get recognition from your peers and from your superiors and even your subordinates.
Colonel, when you talk about this being, I guess, fulfilled in your job by doing a good job of it, what are some of the other things that you found that will give you, say, I guess, a clarity of purpose, some of the things that make you find fulfilled? You mentioned faith at the beginning of the podcast. Is that to you a very important pillar of your life?
Well, yes, it is. And, I'm not a every week churchgoer. However, I believe God has been good to me. He helped me overcome a number of early afflictions, and they enabled me to secure my goals of becoming a Marine officer and a naval aviator, and he kept me safe in combat when things could have gone the other way very easily. I believe you don't need to go to church to believe in God and worship God. I go out on my back porch here in Georgetown, Texas, and sit on a rock and look at the sky and pray to God. I don't need a church to help me, but if that's your mechanism to communicate with God in your own way, that's fine. I do so, and my wife also is the same way. She believes in God, country, and family, and she doesn't go to church either. We pray together. We've been married 56 years, and she'd helped me through my Marine Corps days and beyond. Excuse me.
This isn't a question that I usually ask on the podcast, but given that you've been married for 56 years, what is the key to maintaining a long-lasting marriage?
Understanding and being able to listen to the other person's point of view without reacting to it, to assimilate what they're saying and not reacting, and to compromise. I think that's probably the biggest item in the long-term marriage, because if you are willing to see things from the opposite point of view, from your spouse's point of view, and see where she's coming from, and evaluate that against what you're seeing, and maybe strike a compromise, that makes the process much easier. In some cases, she's more than likely right. So there's no reason not to say, okay, honey, I think you're right. Let's do it your way. And there's a lot of people that have that ego stuck in their head, and they won't allow anybody else to tell them anything. And that's a real problem with some of the marriages. And we've been married. My wife was married twice before, and she's a little older than I am, like 13 years. So she had a lot of experience before she married me. She knew what she was getting into. She knew that I was in the Marine Corps and in a situation where being in aviation, which is inherently dangerous, I come home one day. So she accepted that. I adopted her 2 children from a previous marriage, so that didn't hurt the relationship either. So The secret is communication. Yes, that's probably the bottom line to the relationship business. You got to be able to communicate. If you put yourself in a corner and won't talk, then all is lost.
Colonel, is it true that once a Marine, always a Marine? Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, I'm always a Marine. If you see my shirt, I believe that wholeheartedly, and it's primarily because that was what I always wanted to do, and until they slide me into the box somewhere, that's probably I'll always be a Marine. So I go to reunions and I try to support the Tunnels for Towers and the other type of Marine veteran charities that are out there. It's important to do that. I belong to the Marine Corps Museum, and I've donated some of my memorabilia to them. So it's important to try to stay in touch. Isolation is probably the worst enemy to veterans that I know of. And if you isolate yourself, then you tend to get depressed, and other things crop into your head too, which is not conducive for a long life, if you will.
So, Colonel, the last thing I'd like to ask you before we wrap up is your kind of the motivation behind writing the books. I mean, I'm contacted by a lot of people who say I'm thinking about writing a book. I think it's probably something that crosses through a lot of people's mind, but less people go through with it. So what was the motivation for you in between writing not one but two books about your service?
Well, it came about by another young sergeant who was involved in trying to prove that one of the H-53s we lost in Vietnam, out of the Laos, was not an accident, and it was a direct enemy fire incident, because the people on board were not given Purple Hearts. So his quest was to revisit that accident and to see if he could generate a resubmission of those Purple Hearts and reclassification of the accident to being one of direct enemy action. And so he solicited myself, Colonel Jim Shelton, and several other lawyers, and we all worked together to evaluate the accident, including doing interviews with people that had never been interviewed for the accident investigation, because the squadron had returned to Hawaii, and when the accident investigation was completed, they sort of gaffed it off. And they said, well, it's an accident, so we don't care. So to make a long story short, after 3 years and 2 submissions, we were able to reverse the accident designation as a combat loss, and all 9 people on the aircraft were awarded Purple Hearts, which to me motivated me to think, first of all, there's a lot of stories out there that aren't going to get told. Secondly, maybe there is a mechanism by which I can recognize the people that helped me through my career, from being a Lance Corporal through being a colonel. And if those people can get some recognition, most of them never did. Most of them never will. And so that was a motivating factor. The other factor was I wanted to try to instill in young people that if they have problems like eyesight, extra finger, scoliosis, other things like I did, if they want hard enough to accomplish what their quest is, and they can do it. All they have to do is be all they have to do is persevere and push and never give up. And that never give up attitude is what I wanted to instill in young folks. It doesn't make any difference what color your skin is, what religion you are, whether your eyes slant, whether you are gay or straight. It makes no difference. If you want it bad enough, you can get it. And we all, should be tolerant, and we all bleed red. So we're all the same. It's hard for a lot of people to recognize that, but that's those were the motivations that pushed me to write the books. And there's 2 books in the memoir, and the second one is Field Grade Years that traces from my major through Colonel times, and there's some interesting stories in there about how to deal with the bureaucracy in Washington, which is a real challenge.
Colonel, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you'd like to mention before we sign off?
Boy, I think we've covered just about everything.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 books that people could go and dig into. I'll let everyone know where they can get them. But Colonel, I just want to say it's been a real honor having you on today, and especially as your first podcast, we are very honored. And thank you so much for your time, sir, and for your service.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.